All right, farm hands, let's jump into President Henry B. Eyring's October 2021 General Conference talk, The Faith to Ask and Then to Act. Great talk. It really goes along with a lot of the messages that we've heard these last couple of years. President Nelson always talking about heeding and hearkening, hearing the Lord, right? Hear him. And strengthening our faith, right? President Nelson talks a lot about how we need to strengthen our faith. And so President Eyring really takes that and encourages us even further along that path. You could really divide this talk into 3 sections for your personal study, or as you're thinking about your lesson and organizing that. The 3 sections would be faith to ask and hope for answers, faith to hear and truly listen to what he is saying, and 3, the faith to act immediately and boldly. Okay, so that's just kind of for your personal study. We're going to go over 3 other points or things that you can learn from this talk by President Eyring. Number 1, the way to receive revelation today is exactly the same way that Adam and Eve needed to receive revelation. It hasn't changed through the years. They receive revelation just like we receive revelation, and it is all dependent upon our faith in Jesus Christ. That's the beginning and the end of it, right? President Eyring quotes a few different great scriptures. You can look in the footnotes for those references and study those further, read them together and learn more about that and see how it is the same. You can brainstorm some more ways of other people in the scriptures that have received revelation and see how it is the same way that you receive revelation today. It's a great way to do it. I always love to cross-reference and just strengthen my testimony that way, but also it gives us an opportunity to be an engaged learner, like President Nelson has encouraged us to be. And whenever we're writing and being engaged, the Lord always teaches us more. And so make a list, write things down, and I'm sure you'll see new things in new ways. President Eyring mentions the example of Joseph Smith. That's a great one to study, especially since we're doing the Doctrine and Covenants this year. It's always a great tie-in. Okay. Number 2, the answers that we receive will fit our needs as well as our own personal spiritual preparation, right? We can't just expect this flood to happen because we asked a simple question. It just doesn't work that way. And we know that, but sometimes we ask like that anyway. I don't know. It's kind of funny. Humans are funny that way, I guess. But so we have to put in that effort, right? And some answers are going to come much easier than others. President Eyring mentions how when it's more tied to our eternal welfare, that those answers might come more immediately. But sometimes the answer still might be patient. And he gives that example of Joseph Smith. He doesn't specifically say what he's meaning with Joseph Smith unless you look in the footnotes, and then you can see how Joseph Smith had to wait to get the gold plates out for many years before it was actually the answer was to get them. For many years it was be patient, right? You're not ready yet. Wait a little longer. And we can follow that example in our lives and be patient as well. He also mentioned some ways that we need to be spiritually prepared. So he talks about having our hearts softened through the atonement of Jesus Christ, having the doctrine of Christ in our hearts, paying attention to how we hear him personally. And he also mentions, and this, I kind of touched this on another talk that we were doing earlier, is how when our questions are answered and we listen to the answers, it often leads to better questions. And Joseph Smith is a great example of that, how the question in the grove that spring morning led to more questions. And then after Moroni visits him in the log cabin, he receives more answers, and then he asks better questions, and so on and so forth. And we have this restoration today. And that can be the same way for us, where we learn line upon line, right? And so we can learn how to ask better questions and therefore receive better answers, right? Kind of awesome. Okay, number 3 is we should check the answers that we think we are getting with the Lord's teachings. They're always going to be in harmony with the Lord's teaching, is the point that President Eyring is making in his talk. The Lord isn't going to give us revelation that goes against his teachings, right? Like, it just doesn't happen. The Lord stays the same, right? He's the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So if an answer doesn't quite match what the Lord is teaching, then maybe it wasn't really the answer, right? Sometimes we're our own worst enemy, and there's always opposition in all things as well. So we have to be careful with that and not to call evil good and good evil, right? So be careful with that and trust the Lord in his unchanging ways. Okay? President Nelson also says that as we are obedient to, President Eyring, as we are obedient to the Lord's commandments, we will trust him and hear him better. And obviously, as we do that, we won't be led astray. Okay? So, 3 questions that you can ask now. Number 1. So, we know the Lord speaks to us today. So, are we listening? Or are we trying to listen? Or what are we doing to listen to the Lord? He quotes that great scripture about still small voices. So, are we taking the time to be still, to have that eternal quiet like he mentions? You can even go back and use President Nelson's talk about hearing the Lord, hear him, and what we would do differently if we had more faith, right? Because President Eyring's talking about faith, and if we have the faith to ask, if we had more faith to ask, what would we really be asking? Is that the right thing to ask? And what would we really be listening? Like, what would the answers be? And would we have the faith to listen to them? And how we can strengthen ourselves so that we can hear him better, which is really the question I have for number 2, which is, what are some ways we can spiritually prepare better? Remember, with President Nelson's talk, we want to maybe try new ways that we haven't done before and better ways. So what are maybe some better ways that I can prepare myself spiritually to really truly hear the answers from the Lord and to recognize those answers? Remember, President Eyring talked about some ways that we can prepare ourselves, so you can discuss those further, like how can we soften our hearts, or how can we have the doctrine of Christ in our hearts, things like that, and talk about specific ways and examples and things that you have seen maybe other people do, and write those down in your notes and ponder how you can do that, or discuss them as a class or family. Okay. And then number 3, how can we, or how do we, and how do we change, and how do our prayers change and our questions change when we have complete confidence in the Lord? So it goes back to, if we had more faith, what would we do? So if we had more faith, if we had more confidence and trust in the Lord, would that change how we're doing things now? How would it change? What might it look like? How can we gain that confidence in the Lord more fully? So just kind of some things to think about there. There's obviously more questions that you can ask. Those are just the ones that have kind of been on my mind. Go ahead and share your thoughts and comments below, and let's continue to encourage each other as we study and teach these messages to our families and our church classes. All right, have a great one.